Horror and gaming have come a long way. From the early days of the NES to the more contemporary nightmare simulations of now, people like myself find ways to get scared. Whether it be action or survival horror, gamers have always seemed to be drawn to it. But what makes it so special? Is it the jump scares, the immersion, the over-the-top action situations? Or is it something else? In this short video series, I'm going to go over why this genre of games is so important and loved by so many, and why this is still just as scary or creepy as this. I'm Nick, I pretend to know things, and this is Horror and Video Games, Part 1, Indie Nightmares. Outside of a few games, it's not really surprising. Horror games don't really sell as much as this and this and this, but they're still popular, and that's where independent studios and creators come in. To me, indie games have really pushed the boundaries in a scene that just simply can't keep up with current AAA trends. While some AAA studios are doing an excellent job with horror titles such as Resident Evil 7 and The Evil Within, those games, as good as they are, they lack something you find in a lot of smaller indie titles. Whether it be the narrow focus on gameplay and world building, or the creativity that spawns from limited funding, indie games such as Amnesia, Outlast, and Five Nights at Freddy's have really managed to affect gamers in so many different ways that it's no surprise to see the industry follow soon after. Like most art, the more narrow focus you have really helps make the product stand out, and it can lead to some interesting experiences. For example, let's look at The Night That Speaks. While this lo-fi straight out of an original Game Boy graphics might not look that scary, after a few minutes of wandering around the pitch green halls, I've felt myself getting tense from the anticipation and expectation of what might come next. Even though you're given literally the best weapon ever against monsters in this game, they're still scary. And quite frankly, I found myself screaming "holy shit" out loud. I mean, look at this guy. Now, take this sort of experience and compare it to Resident Evil 7. While that game is definitely scary in its own regard, and it's one of my favorite titles from the last few years, there never was a moment as genuinely unsettling as this thing. And maybe that's where indie horror really shines. While both independent and AAA titles have had their fair share of jump scares, the unsettling feeling you get from an experience that is commercially unsafe can separate themselves from their AAA counterparts. September 1999 is one of those games. While the game itself lacks any sort of jump scares, and the entire thing takes about 5 minutes to complete, it's an interesting look into anticipation and expectations. The game's lo-fi graphics had a serious PT vibe going for it, and the entire agonizing 5 minutes I was playing it, I was expecting someone to break this door open and kill me. But instead I was treated to a short but very effective story about a really horrible situation. And before I knew it, the game had booted to my desktop and it was over. And quite frankly, this is the longest 5 minutes I've ever spent in a game, but it's definitely worth checking out. In September 1999, the anticipation and expectation was the horror. And like many indie titles, it was something new that you just can't get from this year's $60 game. Look, I'm not saying that big games are bad, and I'm not saying that indie games are superior in any way, but it's experiences like this that really make me appreciate smaller titles and the things that these developers can do with no constraints and, well, no budget to go with it. Are indie games the gold standard when it comes to horror? No, not at all. Because quite frankly, I'll still play this over this. But that's not what I'm trying to say here. Sometimes smaller titles with a limited budget and just a few creative ideas can really stick with us. And quite frankly, that's what horror is all about.